ever watched a story that slowly pulls you in, and before you even realize it, you're completely lost inside its world? The Ten Commandments is one of those films that doesn't just entertain, it makes you feel every moment. From the very beginning, the movie builds a sense of mystery and tension, where every scene carries meaning and every character hides something deeper beneath the surface. As the story unfolds, you start to see how small decisions lead to unexpected consequences. The film takes you through intense moments, emotional turns, and powerful scenes that keep you hooked till the very end. It's not just about what happens, it's about why it happens and how it changes everything. The characters in this film are not simple. Each one has a purpose, a backstory, and a role that connects to the bigger picture. Their performances bring life to the story, making every scene feel real and impactful. But what truly makes the Ten Commandments stand out is the way it was created, the vision behind the story, the effort put into its production, and the ideas that inspired it. Every detail, from storytelling to execution, adds something unique to the overall experience. In this video, we're going to break down the complete story, explore the characters, and analyze everything from its creation to its success. And just to be clear, this is not a full movie or a movie screening. It's a detailed review and analysis made for learning and entertainment purposes. So let's begin and take a closer look at the Ten Commandments. When I started watching this film, the very first thing that hit me was the scale. It does not feel like a normal movie, it feels like something much bigger, almost like history is unfolding right in front of you, and the story opens in ancient Egypt where fear has already taken over the rulers because a prophecy spreads that a Hebrew child will rise and destroy their power, and because of this fear Pharaoh Ramesses I orders something extremely cruel: every newborn Hebrew boy must be killed so that no threat can grow. And right from the beginning you understand that this story is not just about power, it is about control, fear, and survival. And in the middle of this chaos, a mother named Jochebed makes a decision that changes everything. She cannot protect her baby by keeping him, so she chooses the only option she has. She places her infant son inside a basket and sets him afloat on the Nile River, hoping that fate will do what she cannot. And that moment feels emotional because you know she might never see him again. And as the basket drifts across the water, it is found by Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, and instead of seeing danger she sees a child. And even though her servant Memnet realizes that this baby is Hebrew, Bithiah ignores it and decides to adopt him, and she names him Moses. And right there the story takes a powerful turn because the child who was meant to be killed is now growing up inside the palace of the very empire that feared him. And as Moses grows into a man, he becomes strong, intelligent, and respected, not just as a prince but as a leader, and he proves himself in battle by defeating Ethiopia and securing victory for Egypt. And this is where the film really starts building his character, because he is not shown as weak or confused, he is shown as someone who earns his position through ability. And at the same time his personal life starts to develop as he falls in love with Princess Nefertiti, and their relationship adds another layer to the story because it connects him emotionally to the palace life, and everything seems perfect for him: power, respect, love, and a clear future as the next pharaoh. But at the same time the film slowly starts showing cracks in that perfect life, because while working on a massive construction project, Moses sees how Hebrew slaves are treated, and this is the first time you feel that something inside him is not aligned with the world he is living in, and instead of ignoring it he starts making changes. He improves their conditions and treats them with fairness. But this creates tension with Prince Ramesses, his adoptive brother, who sees this not as kindness but as weakness. And this conflict between them begins to grow because both of them want power but their ways of thinking are completely different. And the situation becomes more intense when Ramesses accuses Moses of trying to create rebellion among the slaves. But Moses defends himself by showing that better treatment actually increases productivity. And this moment is important because it shows his intelligence and leadership, and Pharaoh Sethi notices this and decides that Moses should be the next ruler. And this decision changes everything because now the power balance shifts and Ramesses is no longer the chosen one, and you can clearly see jealousy and anger building inside him. And just when everything seems to be going in Moses's favor, the truth about his identity begins to surface, because Nefertiti learns from Memnet that Moses is not Egyptian but Hebrew, And this revelation becomes the turning point of the entire story because it destroys the life Moses thought he had. And when Moses himself discovers the truth by finding the cloth he was wrapped in as a baby, everything changes inside him, and he goes searching for answers. And that journey leads him to his real family, his mother, his brother Aaron, and his sister Miriam. And that moment feels heavy because he realizes that the people he ruled over as slaves are actually his own people, and this internal conflict becomes the core of his character because now he has to choose between the life he was given and the truth he has discovered. And instead of ignoring it, he decides to experience it fully. He starts living among the slaves, understanding their suffering, and seeing the reality that was hidden from him. And this transformation is slow but powerful because you can see how his perspective changes completely, and the prince who once lived in luxury now begins to see injustice clearly. And this sets up the next major turning point in the story where his identity, his loyalty, and his future all collide into one path that will change everything. The shift becomes real when Moses stops observing suffering and starts acting on it. And the moment that defines this change happens when he sees a Hebrew slave about to be executed under the orders of the Egyptian overseer Bauchens, and instead of staying silent he steps in. And in that moment everything inside him breaks away from the life he once knew, because he kills Bauchens to save the slave. And this single act exposes the truth he can no longer hide, that he is not part of the rulers but part of the oppressed. And even though he tries to keep it contained, the truth does not stay hidden for long, because Dathan, a Hebrew overseer who fears power more than injustice, witnesses what happened and reports it to Ramesses. And this is where the conflict between the two brothers finally explodes, because Ramesses does not hesitate. He uses this moment to remove Moses completely, and Moses is arrested and brought before Pharaoh Sethi. And when questioned, he does not deny what he has done, he accepts it. And even though he makes it clear that he never claimed to be a deliverer, he admits that if he had the power he would free the slaves, and that honesty costs him everything, because Sethi, torn between love and duty, chooses his kingdom, and instead of executing Moses he banishes him into the desert, stripping him of his identity, his status, and his future in a single moment. And this exile becomes one of the most important phases of the story because for the first time Moses is completely alone, without power, without protection, and without direction, and the desert is shown as harsh and unforgiving, almost like a test that breaks everything that he once depended on. And you can feel that this is where his real journey begins, not as a prince but as a man trying to understand his purpose. And as he struggles to survive, he eventually reaches a well in the land of Midian where he helps defend a group of women from attackers. And this moment is small compared to what is coming later, but it shows that even without power he still chooses to stand for what is right. And because of this he is taken in by Jethro, a shepherd who lives a simple life but carries deep belief. And this is where the story slows down for a moment and gives Moses something he never truly had before: peace. And over time he builds a new life. He marries Jethro's daughter Sephora, and begins living as a shepherd, far away from the world he once ruled. And it feels like he has left everything behind, as if the story of Egypt is over for him, but at the same time you can sense that this is not the end, it is preparation. And that becomes clear in one of the most powerful moments of the film when Moses climbs Mount Sinai and sees something that completely changes everything again: a bush burning with fire that does not consume itself. And this moment is not just visual, it is spiritual, because from that fire he hears the voice of God. And this is where his purpose is finally revealed. He is not just a man who escaped Egypt, he is the one chosen to return and free his people. And this moment defines his transformation completely, because now he is no longer running from his past, he is being sent back to face it. And the hesitation he once had disappears because he now understands that his life was leading to this point. And when he comes down from the mountain, he is not the same person who went up. He carries clarity, purpose, and a mission that is bigger than himself. And he does not waste time. He returns to Egypt knowing exactly what he has to do. And when he arrives, the contrast is powerful because the place that once defined him now feels different. And when he stands before Ramesses, who is now Pharaoh, the tension between them is stronger than ever, because this is no longer a rivalry for power, it is a clash of beliefs. And Moses demands the freedom of the Hebrews, not as a request but as a command backed by something greater, and Ramesses refuses, not out of ignorance but out of pride. because he sees this as a challenge to his authority, and this refusal sets the stage for everything that follows. Because now the conflict is not just between two men, it is between two forces, and the moment Moses throws his staff and it turns into a serpent, you realize that this story has moved beyond politics and into something far greater. And even though the Egyptian priests try to replicate the same miracle, Moses's power consumes theirs, showing clearly that this is not equal, and instead of accepting defeat, Ramesses hardens his stance even more, and he makes life worse for the Hebrews by removing the supply of straw needed to make bricks, forcing them into even harsher labor. And this decision backfires because instead of breaking the people, it pushes them closer to the truth Moses is bringing, and this tension builds stronger with every moment, leading directly into the series of events that will shake Egypt to its core and force a ruler who believes himself to be a god to face something he cannot control. What follows after that confrontation does not feel like normal conflict anymore. It feels like something unstoppable has been set into motion, because Moses does not return with an army, he returns with a warning, and when that warning is ignored, the consequences begin one by one, and the first sign is when the Nile, the very source of life for Egypt, turns into blood. And this moment hits hard because it shows that the control Egypt thought it had over nature is nothing compared to what is now happening. And instead of understanding the message, Ramesses refuses again, and his refusal is not calm, it is filled with anger and pride, because he cannot accept that someone he once considered lower than him is now standing against him with such power, and this begins a chain of plagues that shake the entire kingdom, each one stronger than the last, each one proving that this is not coincidence. And you can see how the people of Egypt start losing confidence because everything they depended on starts failing: their water, their land, their safety. And through all of this, Moses remains steady. He does not celebrate what is happening, he simply delivers the message again and again: let the people go. And every time Ramesses refuses, the situation gets worse, and this tension between them becomes intense because both of them are strong in their own beliefs. Moses believes he is fulfilling a command, and Ramesses believes he is protecting his throne, and this clash keeps pushing the story forward. And one of the most powerful moments comes when Moses warns that the next plague will not be like the others, it will not affect everything, it will strike directly, and even then Ramesses refuses, because at this point he is not just defending his power, he is fighting against the idea that he could be wrong. And when the final plague comes, it changes everything, because it targets the firstborn of Egypt, and in a single night the entire kingdom feels the loss, including Ramesses himself, whose own son dies. And this moment breaks him in a way nothing else could, because this is no longer about power or pride, it is personal, and for the first time he gives in, he allows the Hebrews to leave, and that moment feels like a release after so much tension, because the people who were once enslaved are finally free, and the Exodus begins, and it is shown in a way that feels massive: thousands of people moving together, carrying everything they have, stepping into the unknown. And Moses leads them not as a prince but as a guide, and Bethiah chooses to leave with them, showing that even within Egypt there were those who chose truth over power. And for a moment it feels like the story has reached its victory, but it does not stay that way for long, because Ramesses's grief turns back into anger, and he cannot accept that he has been defeated, so he makes one last decision. He gathers his army and chases after the Hebrews, and this creates one of the most iconic moments in the entire film, when the people reach the Red Sea and realize they are trapped, with no way forward and an army closing in behind them, and this moment builds extreme tension because it looks impossible, and the people begin to panic, questioning Moses, questioning their decision to follow him, and this doubt adds another layer because even after everything they have seen they still struggle to trust, and Moses stands there with full belief, and when he raises his staff, something unbelievable happens. The sea begins to split, creating a path through the water, and this scene is powerful not just visually but emotionally because it represents faith overcoming fear, and as the people cross to the other side you feel the weight of everything they have gone through, and just when the Egyptian army follows them into the path, the water comes crashing back, destroying the army completely, and this moment ends the pursuit once and for all. And when Ramesses survives and returns empty-handed, he finally acknowledges something he refused to accept before, that Moses's God is real, and this realization comes too late for him, but it completes the conflict between them, and as the Hebrews stand free on the other side of the sea, it feels like a new beginning. But at the same time, the story makes it clear that freedom is not the end of their journey, it is only the beginning of something much bigger. Because now they must learn how to live without chains, and that becomes the next challenge that will test them in a completely different way than anything they have faced before. Freedom does not make things easier, it makes them uncertain, and that becomes clear almost immediately as the people move deeper into the wilderness. Because leaving Egypt removed their chains, but it also removed everything they depended on, and this creates a new kind of struggle that is not about survival under oppression but about survival without structure. And as the journey continues, the people begin to question Moses again, not because they doubt what they saw but because they do not understand where they are going, and this confusion slowly turns into frustration, and frustration turns into doubt. And this is where you start to see that leading people is much harder than freeing them, because fear does not disappear, it changes form, and Moses carries that weight as he continues guiding them forward. And the film shows this phase in a grounded way. There are no grand victories here, only constant movement, constant questioning, and constant pressure on Moses to provide answers he does not always have, and yet he keeps moving because he believes there is a purpose ahead, and that purpose becomes clearer when they reach Mount Sinai, because this is where everything shifts again, not in terms of freedom but in terms of direction, and Moses leaves the people behind and climbs the mountain, and this moment feels different from everything before because it is quiet, focused, and filled with anticipation, and when he reaches the top he receives the 10 Commandments, laws that are meant to guide the people, to give them structure, to define how they should live now that they are free, and this moment is powerful because it shows that freedom without guidance leads to chaos. And these commandments are not just rules, they are the foundation of a new way of life. But while Moses is on the mountain, something very different is happening below, and this is where the story takes another intense turn, because the people, left without leadership for too long, begin to lose patience, and Dathan takes advantage of this, manipulating their fear and convincing them that Moses is gone, that he is never coming back. And this is where the weakness of the people is fully exposed, because instead of holding on to what they have experienced, they fall back into old habits. They demand something to worship, something they can see and control. And Aaron, under pressure, gives in and creates a golden calf. And what follows is not just disobedience, it is complete loss of direction. The people celebrate, they indulge, they forget everything they were freed from, and this moment feels heavy because it shows how quickly freedom can be wasted when it is not understood. And when Moses returns from the mountain and sees what has happened, the reaction is intense, not just anger but disappointment, because everything he fought for, everything he believed in, is being ignored by the very people he saved, and in that moment he breaks the tablets, not because the laws are gone but because the people have shown they are not ready to follow them. And this moment is symbolic because it shows the gap between freedom and responsibility, and what follows is judgment. The golden calf is destroyed, and those who led the corruption are punished, and the ground itself opens, taking Dathan and his followers with it. And this scene is powerful because it shows that actions have consequences, even after freedom, and the people are forced to face the result of their choices, and because of this they are not allowed to enter the promised land immediately. Instead they are made to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and this part of the story carries a different kind of weight, because it is not about external enemies anymore, it is about internal weakness, about learning, about becoming worthy of what lies ahead. And Moses continues leading them through this long journey, carrying the responsibility not just of guiding them physically but shaping them into a people who can sustain the freedom they were given. And as time passes, the story moves toward its final phase, where the destination is close, but one final truth remains, that not every leader reaches the end of the path they create, and Moses himself faces this reality, because even after everything he has done, he is not allowed to enter the promised land. And this ending does not feel like failure, it feels like completion, because his role was never to reach the destination, it was to make it possible. And as he looks upon the land from a distance, you understand that his journey was about purpose, not reward, and that is what gives the story its final impact, because it shows that true leadership is not measured by what you gain, but by what you build for others to continue. What stays with you after that ending is not just the journey itself but what it represents, because the story does not end with a final victory scene or a simple resolution, it ends with understanding, and that understanding builds slowly as you reflect on everything that happened from the beginning, because Moses started as someone who had everything without knowing the truth, then lost everything to discover it, and in that process he became something far greater than a king. And when you look back at his journey, it feels complete, not because he reached the promised land but because he fulfilled the purpose that defined his life. And the film makes this clear by showing how the people he led continue moving forward even without him, carrying the laws, the lessons, and the identity he helped shape. And that continuation is important because it shows that his impact did not end with him. It became something that lives on through others. And when you think about the conflict between Moses and Ramesses, it also gains a deeper meaning, because it was never just about two individuals fighting for power. It was about two completely different ways of seeing the world, one built on control and fear, and the other built on belief and purpose. And even though Ramesses had power, armies, and a kingdom, he still lost because he could not change. And that contrast becomes one of the strongest parts of the story, because it shows that real strength is not about holding on to power, but about understanding when something greater exists beyond it. And another thing that stands out is how the film handles faith. It does not present it as something simple or easy. It shows that even those who experience miracles can still doubt, can still fall, and can still lose direction. And that makes the story feel more real because it does not treat people as perfect. It shows their struggles, their weaknesses, and their ability to change. And the journey through the wilderness especially highlights this because it is not filled with victories, it is filled with lessons, and each mistake the people make becomes part of their growth. And Moses himself is not shown as flawless either. He questions, he struggles, and he carries the weight of responsibility in a way that feels human. And this balance between strength and vulnerability is what makes his character so powerful. And when you think about the scale of the film, it is not just about the visuals or the massive scenes, it is about how every part of the story connects to a bigger idea: freedom, responsibility, belief, and purpose. And the way these themes are presented makes the film feel timeless, because even though the setting is ancient, the message still feels relevant. And that is why the story holds its impact even after it ends, because it is not just telling you what happened, it is showing you why it matters. And as the film closes, you are left with a sense that the journey continues beyond what you have seen, that the people will reach the land, that the laws will guide them, and that the legacy of Moses will remain. And that feeling is what makes the ending strong, because it does not need to show everything. It gives you enough to understand that the purpose has been fulfilled. And when you step back from the entire story, it becomes clear that this is not just a story about one man or one moment in history. It is a story about transformation, about how someone can rise from uncertainty to purpose, and how that purpose can change the lives of many. And that is what makes it memorable, because it stays with you even after the film is over, not just as a story you watched but as something you understood. As I kept thinking about the film after finishing it, one thing became very clear to me: this story is not just about events, it is about transformation that happens step by step, and how every stage of Moses's life builds into something bigger. Because when you look at his journey from the beginning, he starts as someone who belongs to power without even knowing the truth about himself. And that makes his early life feel almost like an illusion, because everything he has is based on something that is not real. And when that illusion breaks, it does not happen slowly, it happens all at once, forcing him to face a reality he was never prepared for. And that moment where he discovers he is Hebrew is not just a twist in the story, it is the moment where his identity completely shifts. And from that point forward, every decision he makes is influenced by that truth. And what makes this powerful is that he does not immediately become a leader or a savior. Instead, he struggles, he questions, and he tries to understand where he belongs. And this phase is important because it makes his later strength feel earned, not given. And then comes the part where he loses everything and is thrown into the desert. And this is where most stories would show a hero rising quickly. But here the film takes its time. It shows him broken, alone, and uncertain. And this is what makes his transformation believable. Because he is not confident at this stage, he is searching, and when he finds peace in Midian, it almost feels like his story could end there, like he has escaped everything and started a new life. But the film makes it clear that escaping is not the same as fulfilling purpose, and that is why the moment at the burning bush becomes so important, because it pulls him back into a path he cannot avoid. And this is where his transformation becomes complete, because he no longer runs from who he is, he accepts it fully. And when he returns to Egypt, he is not the same man who left, and this change is visible in the way he speaks, the way he stands, and the way he faces Ramesses without fear, and that contrast between his past and present self is one of the strongest elements in the film, because it shows growth in a way that feels natural, and the conflict with Ramesses also becomes deeper when you look at it from this perspective, because Ramesses never changes in the same way, he remains tied to power, pride, and control, and that is why even when everything around him starts falling apart, he cannot accept the truth, and this difference between the two characters is what drives the story forward, because one is moving toward purpose while the other is holding on to position, and when the plagues begin it is not just about punishment, it is about breaking that illusion of control that Egypt represents, and each plague removes something they depend on, showing that their power is not absolute, and the final plague especially hits hard because it forces Ramesses to face loss in a way he cannot ignore, and that is what finally breaks his resistance, but even then his change is temporary, because once the pain turns into anger he goes back to chasing what he lost, and that moment at the Red Sea becomes the final separation between them, not just physically but symbolically, because Moses moves forward into freedom while Ramesses is left behind with the consequences of his choices, and after that you might think the story has reached its peak, but the film continues because it wants to show that freedom is not the end, it is the beginning of a new kind of challenge, and the journey through the wilderness highlights this perfectly, because now the struggle is internal, it is about belief, patience, and responsibility, and the people who were once united by suffering start to fall apart when they are given freedom without structure, and this is where the Ten Commandments come into play, because they are not just rules, they are a guide to help people live in a way that maintains balance, and the moment Moses receives them is powerful because it represents connection between the divine and human responsibility, but what happens below the mountain shows the reality of human nature, that without guidance people can quickly lose direction, and the golden calf scene is not just about disobedience, it is about how easily people can replace truth with something easier to follow, and when Moses sees this the reaction is intense because it feels like everything he has done is being undone. And yet even after this the story does not end in failure, because the punishment that follows is not just about consequences, it is about learning, and the 40 years in the wilderness become a process of transformation for the people, just like the desert was for Moses, and by the time they are ready to move forward they are not the same as before. They have been shaped by everything they experienced, and Moses's final moment carries a different kind of emotion because it shows that leadership is not about personal reward, it is about fulfilling a role that may not end the way you expect. And when he looks at the promised land from a distance it does not feel like loss, it feels like completion, because he has done what he was meant to do, and the people he led are now ready to continue without him. And when you step back and look at the entire film it becomes clear that this story is built on layers, each phase adds something new: identity, struggle, purpose, conflict, freedom, responsibility, and finally legacy. And all of these elements connect in a way that makes the story feel complete and meaningful, and that is why even after the film ends it stays in your mind, because it is not just something you watched, it is something that makes you think about how change happens, how purpose is discovered, and how true leadership is defined not by what you gain but by what you leave behind. What really stands out when you continue thinking about the film is how carefully every phase builds on the previous one. Because nothing in this story feels random, every moment has a purpose that connects to what comes later, and when you look at Moses's journey again you realize that each stage was necessary to shape him into the person he becomes, because if he had stayed in the palace he would never understand suffering, if he had not been exiled he would never find purpose, and if he had not struggled he would never develop the strength required to lead, and this structure is what makes the story feel complete, because it shows that growth is not instant, it is a process that takes time and experience, and this idea becomes even stronger when you compare Moses with the people he leads, because while he goes through transformation step by step, the people struggle to change at the same pace, and that difference creates tension throughout the story, because even after witnessing miracles they continue to doubt, complain, and fall into fear, and this shows that belief is not something that appears automatically, it has to be developed over time, and the film does a strong job of showing this through their journey in the wilderness, because every challenge they face becomes a test of their faith, and most of the time they fail before they learn, and that makes their eventual growth feel more realistic. And another thing that becomes clear is how the film handles power. Because at the start, power is shown through control, through armies, through authority, and through fear. But as the story progresses, that definition changes completely, and real power is shown through patience, through belief, and through the ability to guide others even when they resist. And this shift is what defines Moses as a leader, because he does not rely on force to control people, he relies on purpose to guide them. And that makes his leadership very different from Ramesses, who uses fear to maintain order. And that contrast between the two continues to be one of the strongest elements in the story, because it shows two completely different paths, one that leads to destruction and one that leads to growth. And when you think about the plagues again, they also gain a deeper meaning, because they are not just punishments, they are lessons that reveal the limits of human control. And each one takes away something the Egyptians depend on, forcing them to face a reality they tried to ignore. And this idea continues even after the Exodus, because the people who are freed must now learn to live without relying on what they lost. And this transition is not easy, and the film does not try to make it look easy. It shows the confusion, the fear, and the mistakes that happen along the way. And this honesty is what makes the story feel more grounded, because it does not present change as something simple. It shows that it requires time, patience, and sometimes failure. And the Ten Commandments themselves represent this idea clearly, because they are not just rules to follow, they are a foundation for building a stable life. And the reaction of the people to these laws shows how difficult it is to accept responsibility after being used to oppression. And the golden calf moment especially highlights this, because it shows how quickly people can turn away from truth when they feel uncertain. And that moment is important because it forces the story to address the gap between freedom and discipline. And this is where Moses's role becomes even more complex, because he is no longer just leading people to safety, he is shaping them into a community that can sustain itself. And that responsibility is much heavier than anything he faced before. And as the story moves toward its conclusion, this idea becomes stronger, because the final phase is not about reaching the destination. It is about becoming ready for it, and Moses's inability to enter the promised land reinforces this, because it shows that leadership is about guiding others to a place you may not reach yourself. And that idea adds emotional weight to the ending, because it shows that his journey was never about personal success, it was about fulfilling a purpose that benefits others. And when you think about the film as a whole, it becomes clear that it is built around transformation at every level: personal, collective, and spiritual, and each of these layers adds depth to the story, making it more than just a historical or biblical narrative. It becomes something that reflects how change happens in real life, and that is why the story feels meaningful even after it ends, because it connects with ideas that go beyond the events themselves. And as you step back from everything, you realize that the film is not just showing what happened, it is showing why it matters. And that is what gives it lasting impact, because it leaves you thinking not just about the characters but about the journey itself, and how every stage of that journey contributes to the final outcome, making the story feel complete and powerful in a way that stays with you long after the film is over. Looking back again, what makes this story stay strong is how it handles consequences, because every major decision in the film leads to something that cannot be undone, and this makes the entire journey feel real instead of convenient. And you can clearly see this starting from the very first command given by Pharaoh to kill the newborns, because that single decision creates the chain of events that leads to his downfall later. And at the same time, the choice Jochebed makes to save her child also shapes the future in a completely different direction. And this contrast shows that actions taken in fear and actions taken in hope lead to completely different outcomes. And as the story moves forward, this idea keeps repeating, because every time Moses makes a decision, it pushes the story into a new phase, whether it is stepping in to save a slave, choosing to accept his identity, or returning to Egypt to confront Ramesses. And none of these decisions are easy, but each one moves him closer to his purpose. And this is what makes his journey feel consistent, because he does not suddenly become someone else. He grows into that role through the choices he makes. And when you compare this with Ramesses again, the difference becomes even clearer, because Ramesses also makes choices at every stage, but his choices are always driven by pride. And that is why even when he has chances to change, he refuses. And those repeated decisions eventually lead to his loss. And this contrast between the two paths is one of the strongest messages in the film, because it shows how different outcomes are created not by luck but by the direction of your choices. And another important aspect that becomes more visible is how the film treats responsibility, because once Moses accepts his role, he does not step away from it even when it becomes difficult, and the journey through the wilderness proves this, because this is where the responsibility becomes heavier than anything he faced before, and instead of leading people out of oppression, he now has to lead them through uncertainty, and this is where the people themselves become part of the challenge, because they are not always supportive, they complain, they doubt, and they sometimes turn against him, and this makes his leadership even more difficult, because he is not just dealing with external obstacles, he is dealing with internal resistance, and this adds a realistic layer to the story, because it shows that leading people is not about being followed all the time, it is about continuing even when others do not understand your direction, and the moment with the golden calf becomes even more powerful when you look at it this way, because it is not just about disobedience, it is about what happens when responsibility is ignored, and when Moses reacts strongly it is not just anger, it is the realization that everything they have been given is being wasted, and that moment forces the story into a phase where the people must face the consequences of their actions, and the 40 years of wandering become more meaningful because they are not just a punishment, they are a period of growth, where the people slowly learn what it means to live with responsibility instead of fear, and this idea connects back to the 10 Commandments as well, because those laws are not meant to control them, they are meant to guide them, and this difference is important, because it shows that true structure is not about restriction, it is about creating balance, and as the story moves toward the end this understanding becomes clearer, because by the time they are close to the promised land the people are not the same as they were at the beginning, they have changed through everything they have experienced, and this change is what makes them ready to move forward, and Moses's final moment becomes even more meaningful because of this, because even though he does not enter the land, he knows that the people are prepared, and that gives his journey a sense of completion that does not depend on reaching the destination, and when you think about the film overall this idea of consequences, choices, and responsibility connects every part of the story, making it feel structured and purposeful, and this is why the film feels so strong even after it ends, because it does not rely on one big moment to carry it, it builds impact through every stage, and each part adds something that contributes to the final message, and that message stays clear, that freedom comes with responsibility, that choices shape outcomes, and that true leadership is defined by the ability to guide others through both struggle and growth, and this is what gives the story its lasting value, because it presents ideas that remain relevant no matter the time or setting, and as you think about it more you realize that the story is not just about what happened, it is about how those events connect to something deeper, and that is what makes it memorable and meaningful at the same time. Another thing that becomes very clear as the story continues is how everything is built on strong contrasts, and these contrasts are what make every scene feel meaningful because nothing exists on its own, everything is shown against something else, and this pattern starts from the very beginning where life and death are placed side by side, the order to kill every Hebrew child and at the same time a mother risking everything to save her own child, and this idea continues throughout the film, where power is constantly compared with purpose, control is compared with belief, and fear is compared with faith, and when you focus on Moses and Ramesses again this contrast becomes even stronger because both of them start from the same place, both are raised in the same palace, both are given the same opportunities, and yet they move in completely different directions because of how they choose to respond to what they learn, and Moses chooses truth even when it costs him everything while Ramesses chooses power even when it destroys everything around him, and this difference is what drives the emotional weight of the story because it shows that people are defined not by where they start but by the decisions they make when faced with truth, and as the story moves into the phase of the plagues this contrast shifts again, because now it is not just between two individuals but between human control and divine power, and every plague is designed in a way that directly challenges something Egypt depends on. Water becomes blood, the land is covered with destruction, and everything that once represented stability starts falling apart. And this sequence is not just about showing power, it is about removing the illusion that control belongs to humans. And as each plague passes you can see how the people of Egypt begin to lose confidence while Moses becomes more certain, And this shift is important because it shows how belief grows stronger when it is tested while pride becomes weaker when it is challenged, and the final plague becomes the most powerful example of this contrast because it brings the conflict into a personal space where it can no longer be ignored. And when Ramesses loses his son, the moment is not shown as victory for Moses but as a heavy consequence of refusal, and this makes the story feel balanced because it does not celebrate suffering. It presents it as the result of choices that could have been different, and once the exodus begins another contrast appears, the difference between freedom and fear, because even after being freed the people are not immediately strong or confident, they are uncertain and afraid of what lies ahead, and this shows that freedom is not something that instantly changes people, it is something that requires time to understand, and this idea continues during the journey through the wilderness where the people constantly move between trust and doubt, and this movement creates tension because it shows that belief is not permanent, it must be maintained, and the golden calf scene becomes one of the strongest examples of this because it shows how quickly people can shift from faith to fear when they feel uncertain, and this moment is not just about disobedience, it is about how easy it is to fall back into old patterns when new ones are not fully understood, and when Moses reacts it is not just anger, it is the realization that the transformation he is trying to create is not complete, and that leads into another contrast between guidance and chaos. Because without structure the people lose direction, and with structure they are given a path to follow, and the 10 Commandments represent this clearly because they are not meant to control people but to give them a way to live that maintains balance. And as the story moves toward the final phase this contrast shifts again into something more emotional, the difference between destination and purpose, because the entire journey has been leading to the promised land, and yet the one who made that journey possible is not allowed to enter it, and this moment feels powerful because it shows that success is not always defined by reaching the end, sometimes it is defined by making it possible for others to reach it, and this idea adds depth to Moses' character because it shows that his role was never about personal reward, it was about fulfilling a purpose that goes beyond him, and when you look at the story as a whole all of these contrasts connect together, creating a structure where every phase builds on the previous one, and nothing feels out of place. Everything has a reason and a result, and this is what makes the film feel complete because it is not just telling events, it is showing how different forces interact and how those interactions shape the outcome, and this is also why the story remains impactful even after it ends, because it is built on ideas that go beyond the setting, ideas about choice, responsibility, belief, and change, and when you think about it from that perspective you realize that the film is not just showing a journey from slavery to freedom, it is showing a transformation from uncertainty to purpose, and that is what makes it strong, because it gives meaning to every stage of the story and connects everything into a single flow that feels natural, engaging, and complete. One more thing that becomes very important as the story settles in your mind is how time is used to shape everything, because this is not a story where things change instantly, it is a story where every major shift takes time, and that slow progression is what makes each moment feel earned instead of forced. And when you go back to the beginning you can see that nothing happens suddenly, even Moses' transformation is not immediate, built step by step, first through doubt, then through discovery, then through struggle, and finally through purpose, and this use of time makes his character feel real because he is not perfect from the start, he grows into his role, and the same idea applies to the people he leads, because their journey is not shown as a quick transition from slavery to freedom, it is shown as a long process where they repeatedly face challenges, make mistakes, and slowly learn from them, and this makes their development feel more believable because it reflects how change actually happens, not all at once but through repeated experiences, and when you look at the plagues again you can also see how time is used there, because they do not happen all together, they come one after another, giving Ramesses multiple chances to change, and each time he refuses it makes the next consequence heavier, and this progression builds tension because you know that something bigger is coming, and that is why the final plague has such a strong impact, because it is not just one event, it is the result of everything that came before it, and this idea continues into the Exodus, where the moment of freedom is powerful but short-lived, because immediately after that the people are faced with uncertainty, and again time becomes important because it shows that even after a major victory the journey does not stop, it simply moves into a different phase, And the wilderness becomes the longest and most important use of time in the entire film, because this is where real change happens, and those 40 years are not just a detail, they represent the time needed for transformation, for people to move from dependency to independence, from fear to understanding, and this long period is what prepares them for what lies ahead, and without it the story would feel incomplete, because reaching the promised land without that growth would not have meaning. And this is also where Moses's role becomes even more significant, because he has to guide the people through this entire period, dealing with their doubts, their complaints, and their mistakes. And this shows that leadership is not about one moment of success, it is about consistency over time, about staying committed even when progress is slow. And this idea becomes even stronger when you consider his ending, because he spends his entire life working toward a goal that he will not personally reach. And that adds a different kind of weight to his journey, because it shows that true purpose is not always connected to immediate reward, sometimes it is connected to long-term impact, and this connects back to the overall structure of the film, where everything is built over time, where each phase leads into the next, and nothing feels rushed or incomplete. And this is what makes the story feel so strong, because it respects the process of change instead of skipping it, and as a viewer you feel that progression, you feel the passage of time through the events, through the struggles, and through the development of the characters, and this makes the story more engaging because it feels like you are part of the journey rather than just watching isolated moments. And another important aspect of time in the film is how it affects the relationship between Moses and Ramesses, because their conflict is not limited to one event, it develops over years, starting from rivalry, turning into opposition, and finally becoming a complete separation of beliefs. And this long buildup is what makes their final confrontation feel meaningful, because it is not just about what happens in that moment, it is about everything that led to it, and this layered approach is what gives the story depth, because it shows that conflicts are not created instantly, they grow over time based on decisions and actions, and when you combine all of these elements together it becomes clear that time is not just a background detail in the film, it is a key part of how the story is told because it allows transformation, conflict, and resolution to develop naturally. And this is why the film feels complete, because it does not rush to the end, it allows every stage to fully develop before moving forward, and that makes the entire journey feel meaningful, because you understand not just what happens but how and why it happens. And that understanding is what stays with you even after the story is over, because it gives depth to everything you have seen and connects all the moments into one continuous flow that feels strong and satisfying from beginning to end. What becomes even more clear as the story settles is how every character is shaped by pressure, because this film does not show people acting in comfort, it shows them making decisions when they are pushed to their limits, and that is what reveals who they really are, and this is especially visible when you compare how different characters respond to the same situations, because when pressure increases some characters grow while others break, and this difference is what drives the emotional depth of the story. And when you look at Moses again you can see that every major turning point in his life comes when he is under pressure, whether it is discovering his identity, being exiled into the desert, or standing in front of Ramesses to demand freedom. And in each of these moments he does not have an easy path, he has to choose between fear and purpose. And the fact that he continues moving forward even when the outcome is uncertain is what defines his strength. And this becomes even more visible during the wilderness journey, because leading people who constantly doubt you is a different kind of pressure compared to facing an enemy, and this is where his patience becomes just as important as his belief, because without patience he would lose control of the situation, and this balance between strength and restraint is what makes his leadership effective. And when you compare this with Ramesses again the contrast becomes even sharper, because he is also under pressure but he reacts differently every time he is challenged. He becomes more rigid instead of adapting, and this refusal to change under pressure is what leads to his downfall, because instead of learning from what is happening he tries to force control over it, and this approach works at the beginning but fails completely when the situation moves beyond his power, and this shows that strength without flexibility becomes weakness over time. And this idea is reinforced through other characters as well, because not everyone responds to pressure in the same way, and Dathan is one of the clearest examples of this, because instead of standing with his people he chooses to protect himself by aligning with whoever has power at the moment, and this makes him appear safe in the short term but ultimately leads to his destruction. And this adds another layer to the story because it shows that avoiding responsibility does not remove consequences, it only delays them. And even Aaron's character shows how pressure can lead to compromise, because he is not shown as a bad person but as someone who struggles to hold his position when people turn against him, and this makes his actions more understandable even if they are wrong, and this complexity is what makes the story feel more real, because it does not divide characters into simple categories of good and bad. It shows how different people react differently when they are tested. And this idea also connects to the people as a whole, because their behavior throughout the journey reflects how groups respond under pressure. Sometimes they come together, and sometimes they fall apart, and this constant shift creates tension because you never know how they will react in the next situation, and this unpredictability is what makes Moses's role even more difficult, because he has to lead not just individuals but an entire group that is constantly changing. And this is where the Ten Commandments become more significant, because they provide a stable foundation in a situation where everything else is uncertain, and they act as a guide that helps people make decisions even when they are under pressure. And this shows that structure is necessary for maintaining balance, especially when conditions are unstable. And as the story moves toward the end, this theme of pressure continues, but in a different form, because now it is not about immediate survival but about long-term purpose. And Moses's final moment reflects this clearly, because even after everything he has done, he faces the reality that he will not enter the promised land, and this is a different kind of pressure, one that tests acceptance rather than action, and the way he responds to it shows how far he has come, because instead of resisting it he accepts it, understanding that his role was never about personal reward, and this acceptance gives his journey a sense of completeness, because it shows that true strength is not just about overcoming challenges but also about understanding your place within a larger purpose. And when you look at the entire story through this lens, it becomes clear that pressure is not just an obstacle, it is a tool that shapes every character and drives the transformation that defines the film. And this is what makes the story feel so powerful, because it shows how people reveal their true nature when they are tested, and how those reactions determine the path they follow. And this idea stays with you because it reflects something deeper than the events themselves. It reflects how growth, failure, and purpose are all connected through the way people respond when they are pushed beyond their limits. What starts to feel even stronger at this stage is how the story is not just moving forward, it is constantly reminding you of where everything began, because every major moment connects back to the origin of the journey, and this creates a full circle effect that makes the narrative feel complete instead of scattered. And when you look closely, you can see that the fear that drove Pharaoh at the beginning is the same fear that eventually destroys his control at the end, and in the same way the hope that pushed a mother to save her child becomes the foundation of an entire nation's freedom. And this connection between beginning and end gives the story a strong structure, because it shows that nothing is wasted, every action, every decision, and every moment contributes to the final outcome. And this idea becomes even more powerful when you focus on Moses's journey, because everything he experiences in the early stages prepares him for what comes later, and his life in the palace teaches him leadership, his exile teaches him humility, and his time in the wilderness teaches him patience, and all of these qualities come together when he takes on his role as a guide, and this layered development is what makes his character feel complete, because he is not defined by one moment. He is defined by everything he has gone through, and this also applies to the people he leads, because their journey from slavery to freedom is not just about leaving Egypt, it is about becoming something new, and that transformation takes time, experience, and repeated lessons, and the film shows this clearly by allowing them to fail, to doubt, and to struggle before they begin to understand what freedom actually means, and this makes their growth feel earned instead of given. And another thing that becomes clear is how the story uses repetition in a meaningful way, because certain patterns appear again and again but with different outcomes, and this shows how situations may look similar but the response to them changes over time. And for example, the people complain multiple times during their journey, but each time the situation becomes slightly different, and each time they learn something new, even if it takes longer than expected. And this repetition reinforces the idea that growth is not immediate, it happens through repeated experiences, and this idea also connects to the conflict between Moses and Ramesses, because their interactions follow a similar pattern: request, refusal, consequence, and each cycle becomes more intense than the last, building toward the final confrontation. And this structure keeps the story engaging because it creates anticipation. You know something is coming, but you do not know how far it will go. And when the final moments arrive, they feel satisfying because they are the result of everything that came before them. And this sense of buildup is what gives the film its impact, because it does not rely on sudden twists, it relies on progression, and this progression is what makes the ending feel complete. Because by the time Moses reaches his final moment, you understand that his journey has already achieved its purpose, and the destination becomes less important than the transformation that led to it. And this is what makes the story feel meaningful, because it focuses on the process rather than just the result. And when you step back and look at the entire narrative, you can see how every part is connected, how the beginning sets up the middle, and how the middle leads naturally into the end. And this strong structure is what makes the film stand out, because it feels intentional from start to finish, and this intention is what keeps the audience engaged, because you are not just watching events unfold, you are seeing how those events connect and build into something bigger. And this creates a sense of continuity that carries through the entire film, making it feel like one complete journey instead of separate moments. And this is why the story remains impactful even after it ends, because it leaves you with a clear understanding of how everything fits together and how each stage contributes to the overall message. And that message stays consistent throughout, that change is a process, that purpose is discovered over time, and that every action has a role in shaping the final outcome. And this consistency is what makes the story feel strong, because it does not lose direction, it follows a clear path from beginning to end, and that path is what gives it its lasting impact. What also becomes very clear as the story reaches its final layers is how belief itself is tested in different ways, because the film does not show belief as something that stays constant, it shows it rising, falling, and rebuilding again depending on the situation. And this makes the journey feel much more realistic, because even after witnessing powerful events, the characters still struggle to hold onto that belief when conditions become difficult. And this is especially visible in the way the people react throughout the wilderness, because their belief is strong when they are saved but weak when they are tested. And this pattern repeats multiple times, showing that belief is not just about seeing something extraordinary, it is about maintaining trust even when nothing extraordinary is happening. And this idea becomes even more important when you focus on Moses, because his belief is not built on a single moment. It grows over time through everything he experiences, and this is why he is able to stay steady even when the people around him are not. And this contrast between steady belief and unstable belief is what creates tension in the story, because it shows that not everyone moves at the same pace. And this difference makes leadership more difficult, because Moses has to guide people who are constantly shifting between trust and doubt. And this is where patience becomes one of his strongest qualities, because without it he would not be able to continue leading them forward. And this patience is tested again and again, especially in moments when the people question his decisions or turn against him, and instead of giving up he continues, showing that true belief is not just about confidence, it is about endurance. And this idea also connects to how the film presents miracles, because they are not shown as solutions to every problem, they are shown as moments that create opportunity. But what happens after those moments depends on how people respond, and this is why even after major events like the parting of the Red Sea, the people still struggle, because the miracle itself does not remove their doubts, it only gives them a chance to move forward. And this makes the story more meaningful because it shows that external events cannot replace internal growth, and that growth has to happen through experience and choice. And this is also reflected in the way the 10 Commandments are presented, because they are not forced onto the people, they are given as guidance, and it is up to the people to follow them. And this again highlights the importance of responsibility, because belief without action does not lead to change. And this is what the people have to learn throughout their journey. And the golden calf moment becomes one of the strongest examples of this lesson, because it shows what happens when belief is replaced by comfort and fear. And the consequences of that choice reinforce the idea that actions have weight. And as the story continues, this understanding begins to grow within the people. And by the time they reach the final stage of their journey, they are no longer the same as they were at the beginning. And this change is what makes the ending feel complete, because it shows that the journey was not just about reaching a place, it was about becoming ready for it, and Moses's final role in this process becomes even more meaningful because he represents the connection between belief and action, showing that both are necessary for true change. And when he looks at the promised land from a distance, it does not feel like a loss. It feels like the completion of a purpose that was never meant to end with him, and this idea ties the entire story together, because it shows that belief is not something that ends, it is something that continues through those who carry it forward. And when you step back and look at the entire film, this theme becomes one of its strongest elements, because it connects every part of the story, from the beginning where belief is almost non-existent to the end where it becomes the foundation of a new future. And this progression is what gives the story its depth, because it shows that belief is not a fixed state, it is a journey that evolves over time. And this is what makes the film feel powerful, because it reflects something deeper than the events themselves. It reflects the process of growth that comes from facing challenges, making choices, and learning from them, and that is what makes the story stay with you even after it ends, because it is not just about what happened, it is about what those events represent and how they connect to a larger understanding of change and purpose. One last layer that becomes clear as everything comes together is how the story treats identity, because from start to finish the entire journey is built around discovering, accepting, and living with the truth of who you are. And this idea begins with Moses himself, because at the start he is living a life that is not truly his. He is respected, powerful, and secure, but all of it is based on a false identity. And when that truth is revealed, it breaks everything around him, forcing him to rebuild himself from the ground up. And this process is not easy because identity is not something that can be changed instantly. It requires time, experience, and acceptance, and this is why his time in the desert becomes so important, because it is where he is separated from everything that defined him before, allowing him to understand who he really is without influence. And this phase shapes him in a way that makes his return to Egypt meaningful, because now he is not acting as a prince or an outsider, he is acting as someone who understands both sides of his identity, and this balance gives him the ability to lead, because he knows what it means to have power and what it means to suffer without it, and this understanding becomes one of his greatest strengths. And when you compare this with Ramesses again, the difference becomes even more clear, because Ramesses never questions his identity, he defines himself only through his position as pharaoh, and this becomes his weakness. Because when that position is challenged, he has nothing else to rely on, and this shows that identity built only on power is unstable, because it cannot adapt when circumstances change, and this contrast between the two characters reinforces the idea that true identity comes from understanding who you are beyond your role, and this theme continues with the people as well, because their journey is not just about leaving Egypt, it is about becoming a new nation with its own identity, and this transformation takes time because they are moving from being controlled to being responsible for themselves, and this shift is not immediate. It requires them to learn how to live, how to follow guidance, and how to make decisions without relying on fear, and the 10 Commandments play a major role in this because they provide a foundation for this new identity, showing them how to live in a way that maintains balance and structure, and the moments where they fail to follow this guidance highlight how difficult this transformation is, because old habits and fears do not disappear easily, and this is why the wilderness journey is necessary, because it gives them the time to move away from their past identity and grow into something new. And as this process continues, you can see that their identity slowly becomes stronger, not because of one moment but because of repeated experiences that shape their understanding, and this idea becomes even more meaningful when you look at Moses's final moment. Because even though he does not enter the promised land, his identity is fully complete. He knows who he is, he knows his purpose, and he has fulfilled it, and this gives his journey a sense of closure that does not depend on reaching the destination, because his identity is not tied to where he ends but to what he has done, and this idea ties the entire story together, because it shows that identity is not something given at birth or defined by position, it is something built through choices, challenges, and growth. And this is what makes the story feel so strong, because it connects every part of the journey to this central idea, and when you step back and look at everything, you can see how each phase contributes to this transformation, from the palace to the desert, from Egypt to the wilderness, and finally to the edge of the promised land. And all of these stages work together to shape not just one person but an entire people, and that is what gives the story its lasting impact, because it shows that true identity is not fixed, it is something that evolves over time, and this evolution is what defines the journey, making it meaningful from beginning to end and leaving a strong impression that stays even after. The story is complete. When everything is viewed together from start to finish, what truly defines the story is how it turns a simple idea into something layered and powerful, because on the surface it may look like a journey from slavery to freedom, but when you pay attention to the details you realize it is actually about transformation at every level, and this transformation does not happen in a straight line, it happens through struggle, mistakes, growth, and understanding, and this is what gives the story its depth, because it reflects how real change works. And when you think about Moses one last time, you can see that his journey represents this perfectly, because he does not begin as a hero, he becomes one through everything he goes through, and each phase of his life adds something to his character, from strength and confidence in the palace to humility and patience in the desert, and finally to purpose and leadership in the wilderness. And all of these qualities come together to define who he is. By the end, and this makes his story feel complete because it shows growth that is built over time, and the same idea applies to the people he leads, because they also go through their own transformation, moving from fear to responsibility, from dependence to independence, and this process is not easy, it is filled with setbacks and failures, but each of those moments contributes to their development, and this is why the journey through the wilderness becomes one of the most important parts of the story, because it is where this transformation takes place, and without it the story would feel incomplete, because reaching freedom without understanding it would not have meaning. And another important element that stands out is how the film connects personal journeys with larger outcomes, because the choices made by individuals do not just affect them, they shape the future of many others, and this is clear in the way Moses's decisions influence the entire nation, and in the way Rameses's choices lead to the downfall of his own power, and this connection between personal actions and collective consequences adds weight to every moment, because it shows that nothing happens in isolation, everything is part of a larger chain of events, and this idea also reinforces the importance of responsibility, because it shows that decisions matter not just in the present but in the future as well. And when you look at the ending again, it becomes clear that the story is not trying to give a simple resolution, it is presenting a complete journey where the destination is only one part of the outcome, and the real focus is on what has been built along the way. And this is why Moses's final moment feels so meaningful, because it shows that success is not always about reaching the end, sometimes it is about creating the path for others to follow, and that idea gives the story a deeper emotional impact, because it shifts the focus from individual achievement to lasting legacy. And when you think about everything that has happened, it becomes clear that the film is not just telling a historical or religious story, it is presenting a message about change, purpose, and growth, and this message is what makes it stay relevant, because it connects with ideas that go beyond the setting and time period, and this is what gives the story its lasting power, because it does not depend only on its events, it depends on the meaning behind them, and as you reflect on it you realize that every part of the film contributes to this meaning, from the smallest moments to the largest events, and this consistency is what makes the story feel strong and complete, because it does not lose focus, it follows a clear path from beginning to end, and that path is what makes the journey feel satisfying, because it shows not just what happens but why it matters, and that is what stays with you even after the story is finished, because it leaves you with an understanding that goes beyond the film itself, connecting the journey you watch to ideas that continue to hold meaning beyond the screen. At this stage, the journey does not slow down. Instead, it shifts into something more controlled and more complex, because now the struggle is no longer about escaping or surviving, it is about maintaining direction when everything around keeps testing that direction, and this is where you start to feel that the story is moving into a deeper phase where every decision carries more weight than before. And as the people continue moving forward, you can see that even though they have come far, they are still not fully stable, their reactions still shift quickly, sometimes they trust, sometimes they question, and this constant change keeps the tension alive because it shows that growth is still in progress and not complete. And Moses at this point is not just guiding them physically but managing their mindset, and that becomes much harder because unlike external threats, internal doubt does not disappear easily, it returns again and again in different forms, and this forces him to stay consistent even when the people are not, and this consistency becomes one of the strongest aspects of his leadership because it keeps the group moving even when their confidence drops, and at the same time the structure that has been introduced through the commandments begins to play a more active role, not as something distant but as something that starts shaping daily behavior. And this gradual shift is important because it shows that rules alone do not create change, it is the repeated application of those rules that begins to build stability. And as this process continues, you start to notice that the people are slowly reacting differently to situations compared to before, not perfectly but noticeably, and this shows that the transformation is happening step by step, and this step-by-step growth keeps the story moving because it adds progression without needing major events all the time, and alongside this the environment itself continues to challenge them, not in extreme ways like before but in smaller consistent ways that test their patience and discipline, and this creates a steady pressure that does not break them but keeps them in a state of adjustment. And this adjustment phase becomes important because it prepares them for what lies ahead without making it obvious. And at the same time the dynamic between Moses and the people also evolves, because while earlier they relied on him completely, now there are moments where they begin to take small responsibilities on their own. And even though this is not always successful, it marks a shift in how the group functions. And this shift adds another layer to the story because it shows movement from dependence to participation. And as this continues, the overall direction becomes clearer, not as a destination that is immediately visible but as a path that is becoming more defined with every step. And this sense of direction keeps the journey engaging because it creates a feeling that something is building continuously, and even when there are no major turning points, the progress does not stop. It simply moves in a more controlled and steady way. And this steady progression is what keeps the narrative strong at this stage because it avoids repetition while still maintaining continuity, and at the same time it leaves space for new developments to emerge naturally without forcing them. And this balance between movement and control becomes the key factor that drives the story forward from here, because it allows growth to continue while keeping the tension alive, ensuring that the journey does not feel complete but instead feels like it is entering another phase that still has more to reveal. Now the movement carries a different kind of weight because the group is no longer reacting only to big events, they are dealing with constant smaller tests that expose how much they have actually changed. And this is where the story becomes more grounded because instead of dramatic shifts it shows gradual pressure building through daily challenges. And you can see that even simple situations start revealing deeper issues, like how decisions are made, how quickly people lose patience, and how easily old habits try to return. And this is where the real test begins because transformation is no longer about what happens in extreme moments, it is about what happens when nothing extreme is happening, and this is harder in a different way because it requires discipline instead of reaction. And Moses at this point has to manage this shift carefully because he understands that without consistency everything they have gained can slowly fade, and this is where his role becomes more focused on maintaining direction rather than pushing it forward. And that requires a different type of strength, because leading through calm pressure is often harder than leading through visible crisis. And as this phase continues, you start to notice that the people are slowly becoming more aware of their own actions, not completely but enough to show that something is changing internally. And this internal shift is important because it marks the difference between forced behavior and chosen behavior. And that difference is what defines real growth. And at the same time the structure that has been introduced earlier begins to show its impact more clearly because it starts influencing decisions in a way that reduces chaos and creates more stability. And this does not happen instantly, but over time it becomes noticeable that the group is not reacting as randomly as before. And this controlled response adds a new level to the story because it shows progress without needing major events. And alongside this, the journey itself continues to present challenges that are not always visible but still significant, like uncertainty about direction, the need to trust without immediate proof, and the effort required to stay united when individual concerns begin to rise. And all of these factors keep the tension present even without large-scale conflict. And this is what keeps the narrative engaging at this stage because it shifts the focus from external struggle to internal development. And As this continues, the connection between the people and their path becomes stronger, not because they fully understand it but because they are starting to accept it, and this acceptance does not remove doubt completely but it reduces its control, and that change is important because it allows movement to continue without constant resistance. And at the same time Moses also adjusts his approach slightly, because he begins to allow space for the people to take small steps on their own, and even though this leads to mistakes, it also creates opportunities for learning, and this balance between guidance and independence becomes a key part of the story moving forward, because it shows that leadership is not just about directing others but about preparing them to move without constant direction, and as this process develops, the overall pace of the journey feels more steady and controlled, not because things have become easier but because the response to those challenges has started to change, and this shift keeps the story moving without losing its intensity, because even though the external pressure is lower, the internal complexity is higher, and this combination creates a phase where growth continues in a quieter but more meaningful way, building a foundation that will influence everything that comes next without making it feel like the story is slowing down or reaching an end. The journey keeps moving with a steady rhythm, and the weight now comes from how consistent that movement stays when nothing forces it forward, and this is where you start noticing that the group is not just reacting anymore, they are beginning to hold their direction even when pressure is low, and that shift does not happen all at once. It appears in small decisions, in how they handle uncertainty, and in how quickly they recover when something disrupts their flow, and this gradual change adds a different kind of tension because now the focus is not on survival but on stability, and maintaining stability requires more discipline than reacting to danger, and Moses understands this clearly, so his role becomes more about keeping that discipline intact rather than constantly correcting mistakes. And this approach allows the group to operate with more awareness, because they are not being pushed at every step, they are learning to carry the movement themselves, and this creates a visible difference in how situations are handled compared to earlier phases, because instead of immediate panic there is now hesitation, observation, and then action, and even though this process is not perfect, it shows that something is developing internally, and that internal development becomes the main driver of the story at this stage. And alongside this, the environment continues to introduce subtle challenges that test their consistency, not in extreme ways but in ways that require patience and focus. And these smaller challenges become important because they reveal whether the changes that have happened are actually stable or just temporary, and as the group moves through these situations you can see that they are not as easily shaken as before, and even when doubt appears it does not spread as quickly, and this slower reaction to fear becomes one of the clearest signs of growth. And at the same time Moses begins to step back slightly in certain moments, allowing the group to respond without immediate intervention, and this creates a new dynamic where responsibility starts to shift, and even though this leads to occasional mistakes it also builds confidence over time, and this balance between guidance and independence continues to shape the journey, because it prepares the group to function without constant direction. And as this process continues the overall structure becomes stronger, because decisions are no longer based only on emotion, they begin to follow patterns that have been built through repeated experience, and this shift from reaction to pattern is what stabilizes the movement, and it also keeps the narrative engaging because it shows progression without needing dramatic events. And at the same time the connection between belief and action becomes more visible, because belief is no longer shown only in moments of crisis. It starts appearing in everyday choices, and this consistency adds depth to the story because it shows that growth is not defined by isolated moments but by repeated behavior. And as the journey continues in this way, the sense of direction becomes more grounded, not because the destination is close but because the path is becoming clearer with each step. And this clarity does not remove uncertainty completely but it reduces confusion, and that reduction allows the group to move forward with less resistance. And as this phase develops further, the story maintains its forward motion by focusing on how these internal changes continue to evolve, ensuring that the journey feels active and ongoing without giving any sense that it is reaching a stopping point, and this continuous progression keeps the narrative open, allowing the development to keep building without creating a feeling of conclusion. No urgency remains, and that absence becomes the final test because a stable system can still fail if it drifts without being noticed, and Deck approaches this phase by focusing on verification rather than action, and he defines a set of deep checks that confirm integrity over time, consistency of response under variation, resilience at connection points, and recovery speed after small disturbances. And he runs these checks across distant regions and across long intervals to ensure results do not depend on momentary conditions, and each check returns within expected limits, which confirms that equilibrium is not only present but persistent, and he then introduces controlled disturbances at low intensity to validate recovery paths, and the system absorbs them, redistributes pressure, and returns to baseline without escalation, and this proves that resilience is active, not passive. And during these tests but identifies early shifts and routes attention to the right zones while the CALISC enforces boundaries where needed, and this coordination ensures that intervention remains minimal and precise. And DEC uses the data from these checks to refine thresholds one final time so that correction triggers neither too early nor too late, and this tuning prevents both overreaction and delay, and with thresholds set he reduces his passes further and observes from distance. And the network continues to perform without deviation, and he confirms that expansion also remains stable as adjacent regions adopt the same behavior through interaction rather than instruction, and this organic spread is important because it means the system can grow without introducing weak points, and he monitors new edges where growth occurs and ensures that connection limits are respected so no imbalance can propagate across regions, and this keeps the structure even as it extends. And he also confirms that no dormant patterns remain by checking for absence of expected micro-variation, and where he finds none he marks the area clear because natural systems always carry small variation, and this final sweep removes the last uncertainty, and with all checks passing he accepts that his role has reached its end state, not an end of presence but an end of active management, and he transitions fully into oversight, moving only when signals exceed defined limits, and most cycles pass without any need to act, which is the intended outcome. And in this state the network maintains itself through its own processes, variation keeps it flexible, local correction keeps it aligned, and distributed structure prevents cascade failure, and DEC remains as the condition that ensures these rules are never broken, not by controlling every outcome but by preventing any path that could bypass detection or correction, and this is how continuity is secured, and as time extends without disruption the system proves its permanence, and the journey resolves not with a final event but with a stable condition that holds across change. And within that condition Bud continues as early signal and the CALISC as final boundary, and DEC as the watcher who confirms that nothing rises beyond the limits that protect equilibrium, and with that the cycle that once drove conflict no longer exists, replaced by a state where balance persists because the system itself enforces it, and his last action is not a command but a confirmation that everything now continues without him needing to make it continue, and that is the definition of completion. At this point the movement feels more controlled but at the same time more demanding because now the real challenge is not how fast they move but how consistently they can hold their direction without breaking under pressure, and this is where the difference between temporary change and permanent growth starts becoming visible, because earlier the group reacted strongly to every situation, but now their reactions begin to settle into patterns that show they are learning from what they have already experienced. And this change is not sudden, it happens in small ways, like how quickly they recover after confusion, how they respond when things do not go as expected, and how they manage to stay together even when opinions begin to differ, and these small shifts carry a lot of weight because they show that the transformation is no longer surface level, it is moving deeper. And Moses at this stage does not need to step in at every moment. Instead he observes more and intervenes only when necessary, and this change in his approach allows the group to develop a sense of responsibility that was not there before, and even though mistakes still happen they begin to have less impact because they are corrected faster, and this creates a rhythm where progress is not stopped by every problem, it adjusts and continues, and that rhythm becomes the driving force of the journey. And as it continues the people start relying less on immediate answers and more on what they have already learned, and this shift is important because it shows movement from dependence to understanding, and understanding creates stability, and stability allows the journey to move forward without constant disruption, and at the same time the environment continues to challenge them in ways that require patience more than strength, and this patience becomes a key factor because it prevents reactions from turning into setbacks. And this is where you can clearly see that growth is still happening, just in a quieter and more controlled way. And that quiet development adds depth to the story because it shows that not every important moment needs to be dramatic. Some of the most important changes happen in the way people think and respond over time. And as this phase continues, the connection between the people and their path becomes stronger, not because everything is clear, but because they have experienced enough to trust the direction even when it is not fully visible, and this trust keeps them moving forward without hesitation. And it also reduces the gap between guidance and action, because now what they are told and what they do begin to align more consistently, and this alignment strengthens the overall structure of the group, making it more stable and less likely to fall apart under pressure. And as the journey continues in this way, it creates a sense that everything is still building, still evolving, and still moving towards something that has not yet been fully reached, keeping the flow active without giving any sense of completion. The pace holds steady, but the pressure becomes more layered because situations start overlapping in ways that test not just reactions but consistency over time. And this is where you can see whether the progress made so far can handle complexity instead of simple challenges, and the group begins to face moments where decisions must be taken without clear outcomes, and instead of freezing like before, they move forward with partial understanding. And this shift is important because it shows that they are no longer waiting for certainty. They are learning to act within uncertainty, and that ability keeps the journey moving without interruption. And Moses adjusts to this by focusing less on giving direct answers and more on reinforcing direction, making sure that even when details are unclear, the overall path remains stable. And this approach allows the group to function with more independence, because they begin to rely on the patterns they have developed rather than waiting for constant instruction. And this does not remove mistakes, but it changes how those mistakes affect the movement. Because instead of stopping everything, they create small adjustments that are absorbed and corrected, and this keeps the flow continuous. And as this process continues, you can notice that reactions across the group are becoming more aligned, not identical but close enough to prevent major disruption. And this alignment strengthens the overall structure because it reduces internal conflict. And when differences do appear, they no longer escalate as quickly. And this shows that control is not being forced, it is being developed naturally through repeated experience. And at the same time, the environment continues to introduce variations that require focus and patience. And these variations are not extreme, but they are constant, creating a steady pressure that keeps the group in a state of adjustment. And this adjustment becomes part of their movement, allowing them to adapt without losing direction. And this is where the journey starts to feel more stable without becoming predictable, because even though the reactions are more controlled, the situations still require attention and effort. And this balance keeps the narrative active. And as it continues, the connection between belief and action becomes more consistent, because belief is no longer only present in moments of difficulty, it becomes part of how decisions are made on a regular basis. And this consistency adds depth to the progression because it shows that change is being sustained rather than triggered. And as this stage develops further, the group begins to carry the movement collectively, not perfectly but enough to reduce reliance on a single source of direction. And this shared responsibility keeps the flow moving forward without pause, ensuring that the journey continues to build without creating any sense of conclusion or slowdown. The movement continues without any break, but now it feels more deliberate, as if every step is being carried with awareness rather than urgency. And this change becomes visible in how the group handles moments that would have caused disruption earlier, because instead of reacting instantly, they begin to pause, process, and then respond. And this small difference creates a much larger impact on how stable the overall journey remains. And it shows that growth has reached a point where reactions are no longer driven only by emotion, they are influenced by experience. And this is where the story starts to feel more controlled without losing its intensity, because even though the external pressure is not as extreme, the internal discipline required is much higher, and this keeps the tension present in a quieter but stronger way. And Moses at this stage operates with a different kind of focus. He does not need to correct every mistake because the group has started correcting smaller issues on its own, and this allows him to concentrate on maintaining the direction rather than constantly rebuilding it. And this shift in responsibility becomes one of the most important developments because it shows that the journey is no longer dependent on a single point of control, it is becoming a shared process. And this shared process reduces the chances of sudden breakdown because stability is spread across the group rather than held in one place. And as this continues, the people begin to show signs of confidence that were not present before, not in a way that removes doubt completely but in a way that prevents doubt from stopping movement. And this difference keeps the progression steady, and at the same time the environment continues to test them in ways that require patience and consistency, and these tests are not dramatic but they are persistent, creating a constant need to stay focused, and this ongoing pressure keeps the story active because it ensures that growth is still required at every stage, and as the group moves through these conditions the connection between what they have learned and how they act becomes stronger, and this alignment reduces unnecessary conflict and allows decisions to be made more efficiently, and this efficiency does not remove challenges but it changes how they are handled, making the journey feel more stable while still evolving. And alongside this, the dynamic between guidance and independence continues to shift, because the group begins to take more responsibility without needing immediate direction, and this creates moments where they operate on their own understanding, and even though this is not always perfect, it builds a stronger foundation over time, and this foundation allows the movement to continue without interruption, and as this phase develops further the overall structure becomes more balanced, with fewer extreme reactions and more controlled responses, and this balance keeps the journey active while preventing it from becoming chaotic, and at the same time it leaves room for new developments to emerge naturally, ensuring that the story continues to move forward without creating any sense of completion or slowdown, keeping everything in motion as it builds into the next phase. The flow keeps advancing with the same steady rhythm, but the demands on consistency increase because now the system they have built is being tested from multiple angles at once, and this creates situations where the group has to maintain balance while handling different pressures that do not arrive in a clear sequence. And this is where the strength of their development becomes more visible because instead of losing control they begin to adjust in real time, and this adjustment does not remove difficulty but it prevents that difficulty from turning into disruption, and this becomes one of the most important changes because it shows that stability is no longer fragile, it can absorb pressure without breaking, and Moses continues to guide this process by focusing on maintaining alignment rather than correcting every detail. And this allows the group to operate with more awareness because they are now responsible for holding that alignment themselves, and as this continues the reactions within the group become more consistent, not identical but stable enough to prevent sudden shifts, and this consistency strengthens the overall movement because it reduces the risk of internal conflict spreading, and at the same time the challenges they face begin to feel more connected, not isolated events but parts of a continuous process that requires ongoing attention. And this connection adds depth to the journey because it shows that progress is not made through single victories but through sustained effort. And as the group moves through these conditions you can see that hesitation still exists but it no longer controls their actions, and this change allows them to keep moving even when clarity is not immediate, and this ability to act without full certainty becomes one of their strongest qualities because it prevents delays and keeps the momentum intact. And alongside this, the relationship between guidance and independence continues to evolve, because the group now operates with a level of understanding that allows them to make decisions without waiting for direct instruction, and this creates a more balanced structure where responsibility is shared, and this shared responsibility reduces pressure on any single point, making the entire system more stable, and as this phase continues the connection between experience and response becomes more direct, because past challenges begin to influence how new ones are handled, and this reduces the need for trial and error, allowing the group to adapt more efficiently, and this efficiency keeps the journey active without requiring constant escalation, and at the same time the environment continues to present subtle variations that require focus and patience, and these variations ensure that the process of growth does not stop, because they create a need for continuous adjustment, and this ongoing adjustment becomes part of the movement itself, allowing the story to progress without losing tension. And as everything continues to build in this way, the journey remains open and evolving, with each step reinforcing what has been developed while also preparing for what comes next, ensuring that the narrative continues forward without any sense of conclusion or pause. The journey does not slow down at this stage, instead it becomes more refined and more demanding because now everything depends on how consistently the system they have built can handle pressure over time, And this is where you start to feel that the story has moved beyond simple progression into a phase where stability itself is being tested again and again, not through major disruptions but through continuous smaller challenges that never fully disappear, and this creates a situation where the group must remain focused without the urgency that once drove them, and maintaining that focus becomes one of the hardest tasks because without visible danger it is easy to lose discipline, and this is exactly what the journey begins to explore, how well they can hold their direction when nothing is forcing them to, and this shift makes every action more important because now the difference between progress and setback is not always obvious. It depends on how consistent their behavior remains over time, and Moses understands this clearly, so his role becomes less about reacting and more about maintaining awareness across the entire movement, ensuring that no part of the system begins to drift too far from the balance that has been created, and this approach allows the group to function with a level of independence that was not possible before because they are no longer relying on constant direction. They are applying what they have learned in real situations, and this application becomes the foundation of their stability, and as this continues you can see that their responses are no longer extreme, they fall within a controlled range that allows them to adapt without losing direction, and this control is what keeps the journey steady, because it prevents small issues from turning into larger problems, and at the same time the challenges they face begin to overlap in more complex ways, creating situations where multiple factors must be managed at once, and this complexity adds depth to the story, because it shows that growth is not just about handling simple problems but about managing interconnected ones. And as the group moves through these conditions their ability to coordinate improves, not perfectly but enough to maintain forward movement without interruption. And this coordination becomes one of the strongest indicators of their development because it shows that they are beginning to function as a unified system rather than a collection of individuals reacting separately, and this unity does not remove differences but it aligns them in a way that keeps everything moving in the same direction. And as this process continues the environment continues to introduce variations that test this alignment, sometimes by creating uncertainty, sometimes by slowing progress, and sometimes by requiring decisions without clear outcomes. And these situations are important because they reveal how well the group can operate under sustained pressure, and as they respond to these challenges, you can see that hesitation still exists but it no longer stops the movement completely, and this is a key change because it shows that doubt is no longer controlling their actions, it is being managed within the process, and this management allows them to keep moving even when conditions are not ideal, and at the same time the relationship between guidance and independence continues to evolve, because the group is now capable of making decisions without immediate input, and this creates a more balanced structure where responsibility is shared across the system, and this shared responsibility reduces the risk of failure because it does not depend on a single point, and as this stage develops further the connection between experience and action becomes more direct, because past challenges are now influencing present decisions in a consistent way, and this reduces the need for constant correction, allowing the journey to move forward more efficiently, and this efficiency does not remove difficulty but it changes how it is handled, making the progression feel more controlled and less chaotic. And as everything continues to build in this way the journey remains active, with each step reinforcing what has been developed while also creating space for further growth, ensuring that the movement does not slow down or reach a conclusion but continues to evolve in a steady and continuous flow that keeps everything open and ongoing without any sense of finality. The movement carries forward with the same steady control but the demand for precision increases because now even small deviations can influence the overall flow if they are not corrected in time, and this creates a phase where awareness has to remain constant across all levels of the journey, and this is where the difference between temporary control and sustained balance becomes clear, because maintaining stability over time requires more attention than achieving it once, and as the group continues through this stage you can see that they are no longer reacting randomly, their responses are guided by patterns that have been built through repeated experience, and this allows them to handle situations with less confusion and more direction, and even when uncertainty appears it does not spread as quickly because the system they have developed begins to contain it. And this containment becomes one of the most important aspects of their progress because it prevents disruption from growing beyond control, and Moses continues to support this by focusing on maintaining alignment rather than intervening in every detail, allowing the group to function independently while ensuring that the overall direction remains stable, and this balance between oversight and independence strengthens the structure of the journey because it distributes responsibility without losing control. And as this continues, the interactions within the group become more coordinated, not in a forced way, but through shared understanding, and this coordination reduces friction and allows movement to continue without unnecessary delay. And at the same time, the environment continues to introduce challenges that require attention and patience, and these challenges are not always visible at first, which makes them more difficult to manage because they require awareness rather than reaction. And as the group navigates through these conditions, you can see that their ability to anticipate problems improves, allowing them to adjust before issues become significant, and this shift from reaction to anticipation marks a new level of development because it shows that they are no longer dependent on immediate feedback to guide their actions, and this proactive approach keeps the journey stable even when conditions change. And as this stage progresses further, the connection between all parts of the system becomes stronger, because each response supports the next, creating a continuous flow that maintains direction without interruption, and this interconnected movement reduces the risk of sudden breakdown because no single element operates in isolation, and this is what allows the journey to sustain itself even under continuous pressure. And as everything continues to evolve in this way, the overall progression remains active and open, with each step building on what has already been developed while still allowing space for further growth, ensuring that the narrative continues forward without any pause or sense of completion. The movement continues without slowing down, but now the level of control required becomes much higher because the system they have built is no longer being tested in simple conditions. It is being pushed through continuous variation where multiple factors begin to interact at the same time, and this creates a situation where stability cannot depend on reaction alone. It must rely on consistency that holds even when pressure shifts in unexpected ways. And this is where the true strength of their development begins to show, because instead of reacting differently to every new situation, they start applying the same core patterns across different conditions, and this consistency becomes the key factor that keeps everything aligned. And as this continues, you can see that the group is no longer influenced by every small change. Their responses remain within a controlled range that prevents disruption from spreading, and this controlled response allows the journey to move forward without interruption. And at the same time, the challenges they face begin to overlap in more complex ways, creating layers of pressure that require attention across different areas at once. And this complexity adds depth to the movement because it shows that progress is no longer about handling one issue at a time, it is about maintaining balance across multiple situations simultaneously. And Moses adjusts to this by focusing on the overall structure rather than individual details, ensuring that the system remains stable even when certain parts begin to fluctuate, and this approach allows the group to function with greater independence because they are now responsible for maintaining their own alignment within the larger structure. And as this process continues, the coordination between individuals improves, not because they are being directed at every step, but because they have developed a shared understanding of how to respond. And this shared understanding reduces the chances of sudden breakdown because it creates a unified direction that holds even when individual reactions vary, and this unity becomes one of the strongest elements at this stage because it keeps the entire movement connected. And at the same time, the environment continues to introduce subtle changes that require awareness rather than immediate reaction, and these changes test whether the group can maintain stability without being forced to respond. And as they move through these conditions, you can see that hesitation still exists, but it no longer controls the outcome. And this shift is important because it shows that doubt is being managed rather than eliminated, and this management allows the journey to continue without delay. And alongside this, the relationship between guidance and independence reaches a new level, because the group is now capable of operating without constant input. And this creates a more balanced structure where responsibility is shared across all levels, and this shared responsibility reduces pressure on any single point, making the entire system more resilient. And as this stage develops further, the connection between past experience and present action becomes more direct, because the patterns that have been built earlier are now applied automatically in new situations. and this reduces the need for constant adjustment, allowing the movement to remain steady even when conditions change. And this steady movement keeps the narrative active without requiring major events, because the progression itself becomes the focus. And as everything continues to build in this way, the journey remains open and evolving, with each step reinforcing the stability that has been developed while also allowing new challenges to emerge naturally, ensuring that the flow does not stop or reach a conclusion but continues forward in a continuous and controlled progression that keeps everything active and ongoing without any sense of finality. The forward motion continues with the same controlled rhythm, but now the demand shifts toward maintaining clarity across the entire system while different layers of pressure operate at once. And this creates a situation where even small misalignment can affect multiple areas if not corrected early. So awareness becomes more distributed rather than centered in one place. And this is where you start seeing that the group is no longer waiting for direction to act. They are maintaining direction through their own responses. And this shift adds a new level of stability because it reduces dependence on constant oversight. And as this continues, the reactions within the group become more predictable in a positive way, not because they are repetitive but because they follow patterns that have proven effective over time. And this predictability strengthens the flow because it keeps movement steady even when conditions change. And at the same time, the environment continues to introduce variations that require attention at different levels, sometimes affecting individuals, sometimes affecting the group as a whole, and this layered pressure tests whether the system can handle both without losing balance. And as the group moves through these conditions, you can see that they are beginning to manage both levels at once, responding to immediate needs while maintaining the larger direction. And this ability to operate on multiple levels becomes one of the most important developments, because it shows that the journey is no longer fragile, it can sustain complexity without collapsing. And Moses continues to guide this by reinforcing alignment rather than controlling outcomes, ensuring that even when different parts of the group face different challenges, the overall path remains consistent. And this approach allows independence to grow without creating separation. And as this process continues, the connection between actions and outcomes becomes clearer, because the group begins to understand how their decisions affect not just the present moment but the ongoing movement. And this awareness reduces unnecessary mistakes and keeps the progression efficient. And alongside this, the coordination between individuals continues to improve because they begin to support each other in maintaining stability, and this shared support strengthens the entire structure, making it more resilient against disruption. And as everything develops further, the journey starts to feel more continuous, with fewer sharp changes and more steady transitions. And this continuity keeps the narrative active without relying on sudden events, and at the same time it leaves room for new challenges to appear naturally, ensuring that the progression does not feel fixed or complete. And as the movement carries forward in this way, the balance between control and adaptation remains intact, allowing the system to evolve while maintaining direction. And this ongoing development keeps everything in motion, building further without creating any sense of ending or pause. The motion keeps extending forward, but now the demand is not speed, it is accuracy across every step, because even slight inconsistency can ripple through the system when everything is interconnected. And this creates a phase where awareness must stay active at all times, not in a reactive way but in a steady and continuous manner that prevents imbalance before it grows. And this is where the group shows a different kind of strength, because instead of waiting for problems to appear, they begin to recognize early signals and adjust before those signals turn into disruption. And this shift from reaction to early correction becomes one of the most important developments, and it allows the journey to maintain flow even under changing conditions. And Moses supports this by keeping the direction clear while allowing space for independent action, ensuring that the system remains aligned without restricting movement. And this balance strengthens the overall structure because it combines stability with flexibility. And as this continues, the responses within the group begin to show a higher level of consistency, not because they are forced but because they are built on understanding, and this understanding reduces the need for repeated correction, allowing the movement to continue without interruption. And at the same time, the environment introduces variations that test whether this consistency can hold over time, sometimes by creating delays, sometimes by adding uncertainty, and sometimes by requiring decisions that affect multiple parts of the system at once. And these situations reveal how well the group can maintain balance under sustained pressure, and as they move through these conditions you can see that their adjustments are becoming more precise, not overreacting and not ignoring signals. And this precision keeps the progression stable. And alongside this, the coordination between individuals becomes more refined, because they begin to anticipate each other's actions and align their responses accordingly, and this alignment reduces friction and keeps everything moving in a unified direction. And as this stage develops further, the connection between past experience and present action becomes almost automatic, because the patterns they have developed are now applied without hesitation, and this allows the journey to move forward efficiently even when new challenges appear. And this efficiency does not remove difficulty, but it ensures that difficulty does not slow down the progression, and as everything continues to evolve in this way, the system becomes more resilient, capable of handling variation without losing direction, and this resilience keeps the narrative active and ongoing, with each step reinforcing stability while still allowing new developments to emerge, ensuring that the journey continues forward without any sense of completion or pause. The forward flow keeps building, but now the focus moves toward how reliably everything holds together when conditions keep shifting without clear breaks, and this creates a phase where continuity itself becomes the main test. Because the group is no longer facing isolated moments of pressure, they are moving through an environment where change is constant and layered, and this means stability has to exist across time rather than in single instances, and this is where the progress made earlier begins to show its real value, because instead of resetting after each challenge, the system maintains its structure while adjusting within it, and this allows movement to continue without interruption. And as this continues, you can see that responses across the group are becoming more synchronized, not identical but aligned enough to prevent imbalance from spreading. And this alignment becomes one of the strongest elements at this stage because it connects individual actions into a unified direction, and Moses supports this by focusing on maintaining that connection rather than controlling each part separately, ensuring that even when different situations arise, the overall path remains consistent. And this approach allows independence to grow while keeping everything integrated, and at the same time the environment continues to introduce variations that require attention on different levels, sometimes affecting timing, sometimes affecting coordination, and sometimes requiring decisions that must be made without full clarity, and these situations test whether the group can maintain stability without relying on immediate answers. And as they move through these conditions, you can see that hesitation still exists, but it no longer disrupts the flow, and this shows that uncertainty is being managed rather than avoided, and this management keeps the journey steady even when conditions are not ideal. And alongside this, the connection between experience and response becomes more direct, because past challenges are now shaping present actions in a consistent way, and this reduces unnecessary variation and keeps the system balanced. And as this process continues, the overall movement becomes more efficient, because fewer corrections are needed and more actions fall within the established patterns, and this efficiency strengthens the progression without making it rigid, because flexibility remains part of the system, allowing it to adapt when needed. And as everything develops further, the coordination within the group becomes more natural, because individuals begin to act with awareness of how their actions affect the whole, and this shared awareness reduces friction and keeps the movement unified. And as the journey continues in this way, the balance between stability and adaptation remains active, allowing continuous progression without creating any sense of finality, and ensuring that everything keeps moving forward in a steady and evolving flow. The movement carries forward with the same steady control, but now everything depends on how well this balance can sustain itself without losing alignment. And this creates a phase where the system is no longer being tested by isolated challenges but by continuous flow, where every step connects directly to the next without clear separation. And this is where the real strength of everything that has been built begins to show, because instead of reacting to change, the group maintains its direction while adapting within it, and this ability to stay aligned while adjusting becomes the core of their stability. And as this continues, you can see that their responses are no longer driven by uncertainty, they are guided by patterns that have been reinforced through repeated experience, and this allows them to move forward without hesitation even when conditions are not fully clear. And Moses at this stage no longer needs to guide every moment. His role becomes more about maintaining the overall awareness that keeps everything connected. ensuring that no part of the system drifts too far from the balance that has been established. And this shift allows the group to function with a level of independence that was not possible before, because they are now capable of carrying the movement themselves. And as this process continues, the coordination within the group becomes more stable, not because challenges have disappeared but because their ability to handle those challenges has improved, and this improvement keeps the progression smooth even when new variations appear, and at the same time the environment continues to introduce subtle pressures that require attention, but these pressures no longer create disruption, they are absorbed and managed within the system, and this shows that the growth achieved is not temporary, it is sustained. And as everything continues to evolve in this way, the connection between belief, action, and direction becomes fully aligned, allowing the journey to move forward without conflict between intention and execution. And this alignment becomes the defining feature of this stage because it keeps everything in motion without needing external force. And as the group continues through this phase, their ability to maintain balance under continuous change becomes more refined, ensuring that even when conditions shift, the direction remains clear. And this clarity allows the movement to continue without interruption, and as this final phase builds further, the system reaches a point where it no longer depends on constant correction. It operates through the patterns that have been developed, and this allows the journey to remain active without needing dramatic events to drive it forward. And instead, the progression itself becomes the focus, steady, continuous, and evolving, ensuring that everything remains in motion without creating any sense of closure, and keeping the flow open as it carries forward beyond what is. And as this seamless progression continues to unfold, the quiet strength of what has been built begins to reveal something deeper, something that goes beyond simple coordination and enters the realm of complete internal synchronization, where every individual within the system is no longer just following a shared direction but embodying it. And this subtle transformation creates a state where movement feels almost effortless, not because it lacks complexity but because every part has learned how to exist within that complexity without resistance. And this is where the journey takes on a new dimension, one that is not defined by external obstacles or visible milestones but by the invisible refinement happening within each step. And as this refinement deepens, the need for validation from outside forces begins to fade, replaced by an internal certainty that does not require confirmation. And this certainty becomes the silent force that drives everything forward, allowing the group to maintain momentum even in moments where clarity might seem incomplete from an external perspective, yet internally everything remains aligned. And Moses, observing this evolution, understands that this is the stage where true leadership becomes almost invisible, where influence is no longer exerted through direct action but through the foundation that has already been established. And this allows him to step back even further, trusting that what has been built can now sustain itself without constant intervention. And this trust is not blind, it is earned through every phase that came before, through every moment where instability was transformed into structure and uncertainty into direction. And as this trust settles into the core of the system, it reinforces the independence that has already begun to take shape, allowing the group to move not as separate parts trying to stay connected but as a unified force that naturally holds its own balance. And this unity creates a flow that is both resilient and adaptive, capable of absorbing even the most subtle shifts without breaking its rhythm. And as these shifts continue to emerge, they no longer feel like interruptions but like natural variations within a larger pattern. And this perception changes everything, because it removes the sense of disruption and replaces it with continuity. And within this continuity, growth becomes something constant, something that does not rely on dramatic turning points but on steady evolution. And this steady evolution begins to define the identity of the journey itself, turning it into something that is not measured by how far it has come but by how consistently it continues to move. And as this realization settles deeper into the system, it creates a level of awareness that was not present before. An awareness that understands that the journey is not leading to a fixed destination but is instead expanding as it progresses, and this expansion keeps the movement alive, preventing it from becoming static or predictable. And as the group moves further into this state, their connection to the path becomes more intuitive, less dependent on conscious effort and more rooted in instinctive alignment. And this instinctive alignment allows them to respond to change before it fully manifests, maintaining stability even in the earliest stages of variation. And this is where the system reaches a point of quiet mastery, where control is no longer something that needs to be asserted because it exists naturally within the flow, and as this mastery continues to develop, it brings with it a sense of calm that does not slow the movement but enhances it, allowing every step to carry the same precision and purpose without strain, and this creates a rhythm that feels both grounded and limitless, a rhythm that does not rush yet never stops, and as this rhythm carries forward, it ensures that the journey remains open, continuously evolving, continuously adapting, and continuously moving beyond what can be fully understood, keeping everything in motion while leaving space for what has yet to emerge.